Hi, this is Catherine of Resin Obsession, and today I'm here to show you how to mix epoxy resin for your jewelry making projects. Now, I want to stress here that I'm showing you how I like to do it. I know there's a lot of people out there who make resin jewelry, and I'm sure they do it differently than what I do, but I'm just going to show you today how I like to do it because this is what has worked best for me. So first thing is a little safety. You'll notice today my purple hands as we're doing this. I always wear nitrile gloves when I'm working with resin. With epoxy it's probably not as big a deal, but sometimes some of the silicone resins are a little fussy with latex and may not cure properly. Also make sure you're working in a well ventilated area. Wear a particle mask or a respirator if needed. Always be sure that you got safety covered. And then you'll notice today we're working on a wax paper covered surface. That way if we spill any of our resin we can easily clean it up, wipe it off, or I can just pick up the whole wax paper and throw it away. So one of the tricks to mixing resin is to make sure that you follow the directions. Some people like to say that they'll put in a little more hardener, a little less hardener. I tell you, follow the label directions, okay? So depending on what size casting you want to make will depend on what size cup. Now you can see here I like to use the medicine cups. These are some of the cups that we sell in Resin Obsession. You can see here that they're marked with cc's or ml's. They also do it by ounce measurements and by drams and teaspoon, tablespoon, and so on and so forth. This is absolutely essential, especially when you're mixing small volumes, because just to get like a couple of plastic cups and kind of guess, just sometimes you're asking for a disaster. The other thing you'll notice here is I've gone ahead and I poured my 2 parts of resin that we're going to be mixing here in a minute. I did that to save time, but you'll notice that I poured it into 2 separate cups. Sometimes you'll see people pour in a certain amount of their resin and then a certain amount of their hardener on top. Well, if you didn't measure the second part correctly and you've squirted it into the first one, then you've kind of ruined your whole batch. So I always pour it into 2 separate cups. Now here's the next part where it kind of depends on how much resin I'm mixing. What you're going to see is that I'm going to pour the hardener directly into the resin cup and mix thoroughly. That's because I'm mixing less than an ounce worth of resin today. If I'm going to mix more than an ounce, then I'll actually get a 3rd cup and pour them into the 3rd cup to get a good mix. And definitely you need to do that if you're going to work with silicone. Silicone it's so much more viscous to begin with that's really the only way you can get a really good mix. Okay, so today I'm going to be using a toothpick to mix these. We also have the Resin Obsession stir sticks. The stir sticks are probably just a little overkill on these small volumes, but they're really great when you're mixing large volumes of resin or mixing silicone, because the silicone is almost like syrup when you're trying to mix it. So I'm going to go ahead and pour, and I'm going to show you how I like to pour. Now I like to take it such that I'm pouring my hardener into the resin, and I close my cup to kind of make it like a spout. Goodness. And I'll pour and I'll stir my resin at the same time. Okay? And it's kind of like the cake batter method. Okay? So I'm stirring here in a circle and I'm going back in a figure 8. And I'll stop about midway and then just kind of stir a little bit. I never ever pick up my stick because I'm trying to do what I can not to put bubbles into the resin, but I'll just go back and forth and go around and do a figure 8, and then I'll go back and I'll pour in the rest of my hardener. So I make my spout again and I'm pouring like I'm doing it like a cake mix. Okay, and you're stirring, and you're always going to get a little bubbles. I mean, you're always going to get a little bit. Obviously you just try the best you can not to incorporate any more than you have to, but you're always going to get a few. Just obviously the fewer you have are the fewer you have to worry about later trying to get out. Okay, so I'm just stirring, and I don't necessarily stir very fast. I just try and stir very thorough. Sometimes I've seen some people that are just literally whisking it to help it come together more quickly. And I suppose you get a good mix, but I just cringe at the idea of getting all those bubbles out later. So, okay, so I've got a medium kind of stir on it. Now I'm going to scrape out the rest of my hardener out of my cup and pour it in here. Okay, scrape the sides. Make sure to scrape off your stir item too, whether it be your toothpick or a stir stick. You want to make sure and get it all off of the sides and your toothpick as you're stirring, because sometimes that's where you'll come down to why your resin didn't harden, or why you'll find some pieces didn't harden. It might be that you've poured a couple pieces out of a batch of resin and the first couple hardened pretty well, and then you get down to the last piece or so that you poured and it's just a sticky mess. And it might be because as you get to the bottom of this, you've had some of your hardener, if you got some of the resin that's stuck to the bottom or stuck to the sides that just didn't get mixed very well, and that's what's going into your piece. Okay, so you can see I'm just going to stir. Okay, and depending on the pot time of your resin, I would say on average probably about 2 minutes is a good stir. Obviously, if you're dealing with a really short pot time on a resin, you know, you're going to have to cut that down. So this resin that we're using today has about a 20 to a 25 minute pot time. So I would tell you, whatever your pot time is, plan on spending about 10% of that time stirring your resin and trying to get a good mix. Okay. Now, as I'm stirring this, I don't know if this is coming through on the video, but I can see some swirls in the resin. It'll look less swirly as it gets more blended. Okay. That's just a good indication that you've got your hardener and your resin going properly. Now at some point here, like right now, I'm going to go along the sides and take my stir stick and really make a point to scrape off the sides, because I want to make sure that I'm not leaving anything on the sides that potentially won't get mixed very well. Okay, see, we're getting a few bubbles, but we'll get those out. Okay, so I'm just going, and then I'm going to scrape down my stick as well to make sure I got my hardener off. All right. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty much how I do it. I'm going to go ahead and finish stirring this and make a resin project. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comment box below. Or certainly if you have something to add, some other tips or tricks that have worked for you, by all means, I would love to hear them. So come on over to resinobsession.com. We can help you with all your resin project needs. Thanks for visiting.